I'm 63 years old, and I've just discovered that I owe 13 million baht to a Thai bank for a business loan I never applied for, never signed for, and never received a single baht from. That's $410,000 Australian. The loan was taken out 18 months ago in my name, using documents I didn't sign, for a business I didn't know existed, by a woman I thought loved me. I spent 37 years as a plumber and contractor in Perth. Started my own business when I was 28, built it up, sold it 2 years before I was meant to retire because the paperwork was killing me and my back wasn't what it used to be. Walked away with $455,000 after tax. Not a fortune, but enough to live comfortably if I was careful. Enough to retire somewhere warm where the dollar stretched further. Enough, I thought, to finally relax after nearly 4 decades of crawling under houses and fixing other people's problems. I'd been divorced for 6 years when I sold the business. Carol left me in 2017, said I was married to work, not to her. She wasn't wrong. We'd stopped talking somewhere around year 15, just existed in the same house, passing each other in the hallway like strangers. No kids, thank God. That made the split clean at least. She got the house in Bentley, I got the super and savings. Fair enough. I moved into a flat in Vic Park, worked long hours, didn't think much about the future beyond the next job. The Thailand idea came from my mate Davo. He'd been going there for years, always came back with stories about how cheap everything was, how beautiful it was, how friendly the people were. I'd never been interested. Sounded like trouble to me, middle-aged blokes going to Southeast Asia. But after I sold the business and had nothing but time, Davo convinced me to come over for a month. Just to see it, he said. Just to get some sun and clear my head. I arrived in Chiang Rai in March 2023. I picked Chiang Rai because Davo said it was quieter than Chiang Mai, less touristy, more authentic. He was right about that. The place felt real in a way Perth hadn't felt real in years. The streets smelled like grilled meat and flowers. People smiled at me even when I couldn't speak a word of Thai beyond hello and thank you. The heat was dense and wet, but I didn't mind it. I rented a small house on the outskirts of town for 8,000 baht a month, about $320, and just existed for a while. No deadlines, no demanding clients, no ex-wife making comments about my weight or my clothes or how I chewed my food. I met Gift at a cafe near the night market. I'd been going there most mornings for coffee because the owner spoke decent English and didn't mind me sitting there for hours reading on my tablet. Gift worked at the real estate office next door. She was 27, slender, always dressed professionally in a way that made me think she took her work seriously. Dark hair pulled back, minimal makeup, quiet voice. She'd come in for lunch sometimes, always ordered the same thing, pad crapo with pork, no chili because it hurt her stomach. We started talking because she noticed I was reading something about Australian property law. She was curious, asked questions about how property worked in Australia, whether foreigners could buy land, what the taxes were like. Her English was excellent. She told me she'd studied business administration at Chiang Mai University, wanted to work in real estate development eventually. She was sharp. I liked that about her. She wasn't giggling or playing dumb like some of the younger women I'd seen with older foreign men around town. She had ambitions, goals. It took 3 weeks before I worked up the nerve to ask if she wanted to have dinner. She said yes. We went to a restaurant by the river, one of those places with tables right on the water where you can watch the sun set over the mountains. She told me about her family. Her parents ran a small printing business in town, banners, wedding invitations, business cards, that sort of thing. They'd been doing it for 20 years, but things were tight now. Everyone wanted everything digital. Her younger brother helped them sometimes, but he wasn't reliable, had problems with alcohol. Her mother had diabetes, needed medication every month that cost more than they could really afford. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just family stuff. Everyone's got family stuff. I told her about my divorce, about selling the business, about how Perth had started feeling like a trap toward the end. She listened the way people listen when they're actually interested, asking follow-up questions, remembering details from earlier in the conversation. When I dropped her home that night, she still lived with her parents to save money. She said she kissed me on the cheek and thanked me for a lovely evening. I drove back to my rental house feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Something like possibility. We saw each other 3 or 4 times a week after that. She'd finish work at 5:30 and we'd meet for dinner, or I'd pick her up and we'd drive out to one of the temples in the countryside, or we'd just walk around the night market eating grilled skewers and looking at the stalls selling hill tribe handicrafts. She introduced me to her parents after about 6 weeks. They were polite, maybe a bit reserved, but her father shook my hand and her mother made me sit down and eat even though I'd already had lunch. Their printing shop was a cluttered space full of ancient machines and the chemical smell of ink. They worked hard, you could see that. 12-hour days, 6 days a week, barely scraping by. Gift moved in with me in July, about 4 months after we'd met. It happened gradually. She started staying over more nights than not, bringing clothes, leaving her things in the bathroom. Eventually, she just stopped going home except to visit her parents. I didn't mind. The house felt less empty with her there. She'd cook Thai food I'd never tried before, som tam, so spicy it made my eyes water, khao soi with coconut curry that tasted like comfort. She'd teach me Thai words while we ate. I was terrible at the tones, but she was patient. In August, her mother's diabetes got worse. Gift came home one evening and she'd been crying. Her mother needed to see a specialist in Bangkok, needed tests that weren't covered by the government health scheme. The family didn't have the money. They'd have to borrow from relatives, she said, and her father was too proud for that. It would shame him. I gave her 50,000 baht without really thinking about it. About 2,000 Australian. It wasn't going to break me, and it seemed like the right thing to do. She cried again when I handed her the cash, said I was too kind, said her family would pay me back. I told her not to worry about it. It's what you do for people you care about, I said. She held on to me that night like I was the only solid thing in her world. The money helped. Her mother got the tests, got proper medication, stabilized. Gift's father came by the house to thank me personally, bringing a bottle of Lao whiskey and a basket of fruit. He didn't speak English, but Gift translated. He said I was a good man, that they were lucky to have me looking after their daughter. I felt proud, in a way I hadn't felt since I'd closed my first commercial contract back in 1994, like I'd done something that mattered. Gift started talking about the future in September. Where did I see us in 5 years? She asked. Did I want to stay in Thailand permanently or eventually go back to Australia? What did I think about marriage? I told her I wasn't sure. I liked Thailand, but I'd only been there 6 months. Marriage seemed fast. She didn't push it, just nodded and said she understood. But I could tell it mattered to her. In Thailand, she explained, if you're with someone seriously, you get married. Otherwise, people talk. Her family would worry about her reputation. I started thinking about it more seriously. What was I going back to Australia for? A flat in Vic Park and a handful of mates who were all married and busy with their own lives? At least here I had Gift, had a purpose, had someone who seemed to genuinely care whether I came home at night. The more I thought about it, the more marriage made sense. I proposed in October at the same riverside restaurant where we'd had our first date. I didn't get down on one knee or anything like that, my knees wouldn't have survived it, but I had a ring made at a jewelry shop in town, a simple gold band with a small diamond. She cried, said yes, called her mother right there from the table. We set the date for January, after the cool season started and before the hot season made outdoor ceremonies unbearable. The sin-sod discussion happened in November. That's the bride price, the money, or gold you give to the bride's family at the wedding. Gift said traditionally it was meant to show you could support a wife, prove you were financially stable. In modern times it was often just symbolic. You'd give it at the ceremony and the family would give most of it back afterwards to help the couple start their life together. But her family was traditional, she said. They'd expect at least 300,000 baht, maybe more given our age difference and the fact that I was foreign. They'd need to save face in front of the community. 300,000 baht, about 12,000 Australian dollars. I had the money, but it felt like a lot for something symbolic. I asked Davo about it. He said it was normal, said he'd paid 200,000 at his wedding and got about half back. Just how things worked, he said. You couldn't avoid it without insulting the family. I agreed to 400,000. Gift said her family would remember my generosity forever. The wedding was small, maybe 60 people, held at a hotel in town with a ceremony mixing Buddhist traditions and local customs I didn't understand but went along with. I wore a suit that didn't breathe in the heat. Gift wore a traditional Thai wedding dress, red and gold, looked stunning in a way that made me forget I was 36 years older than her. Her family paraded the sinsod money on trays during the ceremony, 400,000 baht in cash, plus a few baht weight of gold jewelry I'd bought from a shop. Gift recommended. Everyone took photos. Her mother cried. Her father made a speech in Thai that Gift told me was about how proud he was that his daughter found such a good man. I didn't get any of the money back afterwards. Gift said her father needed it for the business, that things were worse than she'd realized. The printing shop was about to go under. They owed suppliers, owed rent on the building, owed money to her uncle who'd lent them capital 2 years ago. If they closed, her parents would have nothing. Her mother's health couldn't take the stress. Could I understand? Could I give them time to recover and pay me back? I understood. Or I thought I did. It was my wife's family now. We were all in this together. Gift suggested we open a joint bank account in December. Made sense for married couples, she said. Easier to manage household expenses, showed trust and commitment. I'd keep my main account in Australia where my savings were, but we'd have a Thai account together for day-to-day living costs. I put 300,000 baht in it to start with, figured that would cover a few months of expenses and gave her access to handle bills and shopping while I was still getting used to Thai banking apps. I noticed the balance was lower than expected when I checked in January. Not dramatically lower, but down to about 170,000 when I thought it should be closer to 250,000 given what we'd been spending. I asked Gift about it. She showed me receipts. Her mother's medication cost more than she'd thought. Her brother needed money to pay off a debt to some guys who were threatening him. The house rent had gone up. Everything had an explanation. I felt guilty for asking. In February, her father came to me with a business opportunity. The printing business was dying, he said through Gift's translation, but he had an idea to pivot. Specialty packaging for local products, coffee from the hill tribes, textiles, honey, tea. Chiang Rai was becoming known for artisanal goods, and the producers needed better packaging to sell to tourists and export markets. He had contacts, had manufacturers willing to give him materials on credit, but he needed capital for the equipment. A proper die-cutting machine, a laminator, upgraded design software. About 1 million baht total. About 40,000 Australian. He'd drawn up a business plan. Gift showed it to me, translated the key points. It actually looked decent. Profit margins on specialty packaging were better than standard printing. The market was growing. Tourism was coming back after the pandemic. If it worked, he'd pay me back within 2 years, plus 20% return on investment. If it didn't work, well, he'd still owe me the money, but it might take longer. I thought about it for a week, talked to Davo. He said Thai family businesses were risky, said I should be careful, said a lot of these ventures went nowhere and you never saw the money again. But I kept thinking about Gift's father in that shop, 12 hours a day, getting older, watching his livelihood disappear because technology had moved on. He was trying to adapt. That took guts. And if it worked, if the business turned around, it would secure Gift's family, our family now. I gave him 800,000 baht, about 32,000 Australian, told him I believed in him, told him to make it work. He shook my hand with both of his hands, said something in Thai that Gift translated as a Buddhist blessing. Gift cried again. I was becoming familiar with her crying when I gave her family money. The equipment arrived in March. I went to the shop to see it. The die-cutting machine was impressive, German-made, looked professional. Her father was already taking orders, showing samples to potential clients. He seemed energized in a way Gift said she hadn't seen in years. I felt good about it, like I'd made the right call. Gift started spending more time at the shop, helping her father with customer relations and design work. She was good at it, had an eye for aesthetics I wouldn't have guessed at. She'd come home late some nights, smelling like ink and paper, exhausted but happy. We'd eat together, and she'd tell me about the orders they were working on: coffee bags for a cooperative in Mae Salong, tea packaging for a Chinese export company, wine bottle labels for a vineyard that had just opened outside town. The joint account kept draining faster than I expected. I'd put in another 200,000 baht in February, and it was nearly gone by April. When I asked about it, Gift got defensive for the first time since I'd known her. Did I not trust her? Was I going to monitor every baht like she was a child? She was managing our household, managing her mother's medical expenses, helping her father get materials for rush orders before his suppliers paid their invoices. Did I expect her to ask permission every time something came up? I backed off. She was right. I was being controlling. This was what marriage looked like. Trust. I put another 300,000 baht in the account and stopped checking it daily. In May, Gift said her father wanted to expand the business. Things were going well, better than expected, and he had opportunities for bigger contracts, corporate clients in Bangkok who needed ongoing packaging solutions. But he needed proper business registration, needed to set up a limited company instead of operating as a sole proprietorship. That required registered capital, at least 2 million baht, to look legitimate to corporate clients. This is where I should have said no. This is where every instinct I developed over 3 decades in business should have kicked in and told me to slow down, to get everything in writing, to consult a lawyer. But Gift's father had paid back 50,000 baht from the first loan in April. He was making good on his promise. The business was working. And Gift explained that if I was listed as a director of the company, I'd have legal protection. I would be able to oversee the finances, would have a formal role instead of just being a foreign ATM. It made sense. We went to a law office, Gift knew. The lawyer spoke decent English, explained that we'd register the company with 2 million baht in capital, that I'd be listed as a minority shareholder. Foreigners couldn't own more than 49% of a Thai company, and that Gift's father would be majority shareholder and managing director. I'd be a director with oversight of major financial decisions. The lawyer had all the paperwork ready, just needed signatures and copies of my passport and bank statements to show I could cover my share of the registered capital. I signed forms for about 45 minutes. Everything was in Thai with English summaries. The lawyer walked me through each one, explaining what it was: articles of association, shareholder agreement, director appointment, tax registration. Gift was there translating anything the lawyer didn't explain clearly. Her father was there too, looking proud and official in a business shirt I'd never seen him wear before. The company registration cost 60,000 baht in fees. I transferred 2 million baht into a company bank account the lawyer had set up. Gift's father transferred his share, though Gift mentioned he'd borrowed most of it from relatives and would pay them back once the business was generating profit. The lawyer said everything was in order, said we were officially in business, said I should receive copies of all the registration documents within 2 weeks. I never received the documents. When I asked Gift about it in June, she said there was a delay at the Ministry of Commerce, that these things took time in Thailand, that the lawyer would send them when they came through. I didn't push it. I was tired of being the suspicious foreigner, tired of acting like everyone was trying to cheat me. The joint account was empty again by July. I'd put in another 400,000 baht in June and it was gone. Gift said the company needed short-term cash flow help, that several clients were slow to pay their invoices, and her father couldn't cover payroll for the new employees he'd hired. I transferred another 300,000 baht directly to the company account. Told Gift this had to be the last time, that I wasn't a bank, that her father needed to manage cash flow better. She got angry, told me I didn't understand Thai business culture, that relationships took time to build, that clients sometimes paid late and you couldn't push them or you'd lose the contract. Told me her father was working himself sick trying to make the business work and I was treating him like he was incompetent. Told me if I didn't want to help her family, then maybe I didn't want to be married to her. I apologized. I didn't mean it like that, I said. I was just worried about the money. She softened, said she was stressed too, said her father was under a lot of pressure and she felt caught in the middle. We'd be fine, she said. The business would stabilize. I just needed to trust her. I stopped checking the bank accounts entirely after that. Every time I looked at them, I got anxious, and every time I got anxious, Gift and I fought. It was easier not to know. I was spending about 2,000 Australian dollars a month on living expenses, another 3 or 4,000 on family emergencies and business cash flow problems. I had about 280,000 Australian left in my main account, still comfortable, still enough to last another few years if I was careful. In August, Gift said she needed to go to Bangkok for a week for a business course. The company was growing and she wanted to learn proper accounting and management practices so she could help her father more professionally. The course cost 80,000 baht. I paid for it. She came back with a certificate and a lot of talk about business systems and processes. She started spending even more time at the shop, sometimes not coming home until 10 or 11 at night. We had sex less frequently. When I tried to initiate, she'd say she was tired or stressed or not feeling well. We'd gone from 3 or 4 times a week when we first met to once a week by August, maybe twice if I was lucky. I tried not to take it personally. We'd been together over a year now. The initial passion fades. That's normal. That's what happens in marriage. She started sleeping at her parents' house a few nights a week in September. Said it was easier when she was working late at the shop. Said she didn't want to wake me up coming home at midnight. Made sense. I missed her, but I understood. The business came first right now. Once it was stable, we'd have more time together. My visa extension came up for renewal in October. I was on a 1-year marriage visa that required proof of income or funds in a Thai bank account. The account needed to have 800,000 baht in it for at least 2 months before the extension. I mentioned this to Gift in August. She said no problem, we'd make sure the account had the right amount in time. When I checked the account in September, it had 70,000 baht in it. I panicked, told Gift we needed to get 800,000 in there immediately or I couldn't renew my visa. She got defensive again. Said her father had borrowed from the joint account for a rush order, that he'd pay it back in a week, that I was overreacting. I told her this wasn't optional, that immigration didn't care about rush orders, that if I couldn't renew my visa, I'd have to leave the country. She called her father. 30 minutes later, 500,000 baht appeared in the account. Where the hell did that come from? I asked. Gift said he'd been holding cash for me, keeping it liquid for the business, paying it back now. It didn't make sense, but I was too stressed to argue. I transferred another 300,000 from my Australian account to make up the difference. The visa extension went through in October. The immigration officer barely looked at my paperwork, stamped my passport, told me to come back in a year. I felt relief that was probably disproportionate to the situation. In November, the joint account dropped to 0 again. This time, when I asked Gift about it, she told me to check with her father. She wasn't managing the account anymore. He had access to handle company expenses. I hadn't known he had access. I asked why she'd given him access without telling me. She said I'd signed something authorizing it when we registered the company. I didn't remember signing anything like that, but I'd signed so many documents I couldn't be sure. I decided to go to the shop and talk to her father directly. Gift said he wasn't there, had gone to Bangkok for a trade show. I asked for the company's financial records, said I was a director and had a right to see them. Gift said they were at the accountant's office, being prepared for the annual tax filing. I asked who the accountant was. She gave me a name and address. I went there the next day. The accountant spoke limited English but understood what I was asking for. She seemed confused when I mentioned the company name, looked through her files, told me she'd handled the initial registration but they'd never engaged her services after that. She had no financial records, no tax filings, nothing after the registration in May. I felt something cold settle in my chest, went back home, waited for Gift. When she arrived at 11:30 that night, I asked her directly, "Where are the company's financial records?" She said her father had changed accountants, had gone with someone cheaper. Who? She didn't remember the name. She was tired. Could we talk about this tomorrow? We couldn't talk about it tomorrow because she left before I woke up and didn't come home that night, or the next night. On the 3rd day, her mother called me, asked in broken English if I'd seen Gift. She hadn't been home in 3 days. Her father was worried. I didn't believe her. Thought they were all in on it, whatever it was. I went to the bank where we had the joint account, asked to see the transaction history for the past 6 months. The bank officer was reluctant at first, but eventually printed it out. 327 pages, transfers out nearly every day. most of them to accounts I didn't recognize. A few to what looked like loan companies. One massive transfer in September of 4 million baht to something called Chiang Rai Business Finance. I took the printout to a Thai friend I'd met at a bar, a guy named Wichai who used to be a police officer before he retired. Showed him the transactions, asked him what Chiang Rai Business Finance was. He looked at it, made some phone calls, came back 30 minutes later looking uncomfortable. "It's a loan company," he said. "Your wife took out a business loan using your company as collateral." "What company?" I said. "We registered a company, but there's no real business. There's her father's printing shop, but that's not the registered company." Wichai made more calls, came back looking worse. "The registered company you're a director of," he said, "took out a loan for 13 million baht in July. 13 million. The collateral was listed as business assets and property. There's a personal guarantee signed by you as director." "I never signed a personal guarantee," I said. Wichai pulled up images on his phone, bank documents, loan agreements, signature pages. There was my signature, or something very close to my signature. Close enough that I couldn't be certain I hadn't signed it in that pile of documents back in May. My hands started shaking. I had to sit down. Wichai got me water. "How much did you invest in this business?" he asked. I did the math in my head. The sin sod, the joint account, the business capital, the cash flow help. About 300,000 Australian dollars. Maybe more. I'd stopped keeping track. "Where's the 13 million baht now?" I asked. Wichai checked his contacts again. "Most of it was withdrawn in cash within 2 weeks of the loan being approved," he said. "Some transfers to accounts in Bangkok, some to accounts in Laos. The loan is in default. Chiang Rai Business Finance has been trying to contact you for 3 months. They're preparing legal action." I called Gift's phone. It went to voicemail. Called her mother. She hung up on me. Went to the printing shop. It was closed, windows dark, a "for rent" sign in the window. The German die-cutting machine was gone. I hired a lawyer the next day. Cost me another 50,000 baht just for the consultation. She reviewed everything: the company registration, the bank statements, the loan documents. Her assessment was delivered in careful legal English. I was listed as a director of a Thai limited company. That company had taken out a legitimate loan from a licensed finance company. There was a signature on the loan guarantee that would be difficult to prove was forged unless I could provide evidence I was not in the country at the time of signing, which I couldn't because I was in the country. The loan was in default. The finance company could pursue repayment through the courts. As a director with signing authority, I was personally liable for the debt. "But I never saw the money," I said. "Doesn't matter," she said. "You were a director. You had fiduciary responsibility to know what the company was doing. Your signature is on documents authorizing the loan." "Can I prove Gift forged my signature?" "Only if you can demonstrate through forensic analysis that the signature is definitively not yours," she said. "That costs money and takes time, and even if you succeed, you'd need to file criminal charges. Criminal investigations in Thailand take years. The loan company won't wait. They'll get a civil judgment against you first." "How much do I owe?" I asked. 13 million baht principal plus interest and penalties for the 4 months of default," she said. "About 14.2 million baht total, about 568,000 Australian dollars. You have about 240,000 Australian in your bank accounts in Thailand and Australia combined. You don't have enough to pay it." "What happens if I don't pay?" "The finance company obtains a judgment," she said. "They can seize any assets in your name in Thailand. They can garnish your bank accounts. They can prevent you from leaving the country until the debt is satisfied. They can file for bankruptcy proceedings against you." "I can't pay $500,000 I don't have," I said. She looked at me with something like pity. "Then you should speak with the finance company about a payment plan," she said. "Or you should leave Thailand before they get a court order preventing you from leaving." I went back to my rental house. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. Gift's clothes were still in the closet. Her makeup was still in the bathroom. The coffee maker I'd bought her for her birthday was still on the counter. It looked like she'd just stepped out for work and would be back any minute. She never came back. I tried calling every number I had for her and her family. All of them went to voicemail or were disconnected. I went to the address where her parents supposedly lived. Different people lived there, said they'd been renting the house for 2 years, didn't know anyone by the names I gave them. I went to the real estate office where Gift had worked. They said no one by that name had ever been employed there. I checked the cafe where we'd met. The owner didn't remember her. It was like she'd never existed. I got the first official letter from Chiang Rai Business Finance in December. Polite but firm. 14.2 million baht owed. Payment demanded within 30 days or legal proceedings would commence. I showed it to my lawyer. She said I had options. I could negotiate a settlement for less than the full amount. I could propose a long-term payment plan. I could declare bankruptcy. I could leave Thailand and default on the loan, though that would make it impossible to ever return. How much could I settle for? I asked. Maybe 60 to 70% of the total, she said. Maybe 8 or 9 million baht. About 360,000 Australian, which was more than I had. I contacted Davo, told him everything. He didn't say I told you so, which I appreciated. He said he knew a guy who knew people at the finance company, maybe could negotiate something. I told him to try. The guy came back a week later with an offer. 7.5 million baht, payable within 60 days, or they'd proceed with court action. About 300,000 Australian. I didn't have 300,000 Australian. I had about 220,000 after paying the lawyer and living expenses for 2 months. I called my sister in Australia, asked if I could borrow money. She said no. She didn't have that kind of cash, and even if she did, she wouldn't throw it into a Thai financial black hole. She said I should come home, should cut my losses, should let the Thai courts sort it out without me. I started selling everything I owned. The furniture in the rental house, my laptop, my phone, bought a cheap Nokia brick to replace it. My watch, a nice Seiko I'd worn for 20 years, got about 80,000 baht total, maybe 3,000 Australian. It was nothing against what I owed. The second letter came in January. This one wasn't polite. Court proceedings initiated. Judgment expected within 90 days. Asset seizure authorized. Travel ban requested. I called the Australian embassy. Explained the situation. The consular officer was sympathetic but clear. This was a civil matter between me and a Thai company. The embassy couldn't intervene in private legal disputes. She suggested I resolve it or leave the country before the travel ban was enforced. I packed a single bag in February, left everything else, the furniture, the kitchen equipment, the clothes, all the artifacts of the life I'd tried to build. Booked a one-way flight to Perth using a credit card I'd sworn I wouldn't use. The credit limit was enough for the ticket plus about 2 weeks of cheap living once I got back. At the airport I was terrified they'd stop me, that the travel ban had already gone into effect. I checked in, went through immigration, waited in the departure lounge with my heart hammering. They called my flight. I boarded. The plane took off. I watched Chiang Rai disappear below me, the mountains fading into haze, and felt nothing. No relief, no regret, just nothing. I'm back in Perth now, living with my sister in her spare room. She's being kind about it, but I know it's charity. I'm 63 years old with about $12,000 Australian to my name, a maxed-out credit card, and no assets. I've got no way to get my money back. The Thai lawyer said I could file criminal charges against Gift, but I'd need to be in Thailand for the investigation and court proceedings, which could take 3 to 5 years, and there's no guarantee they'd find her or that I'd recover anything even if they did. The finance company emails me once a month. The debt's grown to over 15 million baht now with accumulated interest and legal fees, about 600,000 Australian. They've obtained a judgment against me in Thai courts. It's enforceable if I ever return to Thailand, which I never will. They can't touch me in Australia, but I can never go back. Can't go back to the country I thought would be my retirement home. Can't go back to the house I rented, the cafe I liked, the mountains I used to drive through on quiet mornings. I think about Gift sometimes, who she really was. Whether her name was even Gift, or if that was just another thing she made up. Whether her family was real, or actors she hired. Whether anything about our relationship was genuine, or if it was a performance from day one. I think she saw me coming from a mile away. 61 years old, recently divorced, carrying around visible loneliness like a bad smell. I told her in our second conversation how much I'd sold my business for. Told her exactly how much I had in the bank because I wanted to impress her. Wanted her to know I was financially stable. Wanted her to see me as a catch. I gave her a roadmap to rob me and then acted surprised when she followed it. The worst part isn't the money. I mean, it's bad. I'll probably never recover financially. I'll be working until I die now, some part-time tradie gig if I'm lucky. If my body holds up, if anyone wants to hire a 63-year-old plumber with a decade-long gap in his work history. The worst part is that I can't trust my own judgment anymore. I looked at Gift and saw love. I looked at her family and saw people who needed help. I looked at that business opportunity and saw a smart investment. I was wrong about all of it. How do you come back from being that wrong? How do you trust yourself to make any decision ever again? I've started telling people what happened, not because I want sympathy. I don't deserve sympathy, but because maybe someone will hear it and won't make the same mistake. The number of times someone said to me, "I know a guy that happened to," is disturbing. There's an entire industry in Thailand built around separating older foreign men from their money. And it works because we want to believe we're different, that our situation is special, that the woman we met actually loves us despite being 30 years younger and desperately poor. If you're reading this and you're thinking about retiring to Thailand, about meeting a younger Thai woman, about investing in her family business, stop. Just stop. I don't care how different you think your situation is. I don't care how much you trust her. I don't care if she's never asked you for money. It doesn't matter. The story ends the same way. Keep your money separate. Never put assets in anyone else's name. Never sign documents you don't fully understand, and definitely never sign stacks of documents in a language you can't read. If something requires you to be a director of a company, walk away. If her family has an emergency every other month, walk away. If she's asking you to solve her family's financial problems, walk away. Better yet, don't go. Stay where you are. Date women your own age who have their own money and their own lives. Die lonely in your own country instead of broke in someone else's. I'm 63 years old. I'm starting over from nothing. I'll probably die in debt, and the woman who destroyed my life is somewhere in Thailand right now, probably doing the same thing to someone else, some other lonely divorced guy who thinks he's finally found happiness. The rules aren't different in Thailand. They're exactly the same. I just wanted to believe they weren't.